The war crimes allegations in Sudan did not just start today. Since 2003, Sudan has witnessed a grave humanitarian crisis with civilians enduring extreme violence. The armed opposition group's attacks prompted the Sudanese government forces to retaliate, targeting not only the fighters, but also the civilian populations of specific ethnic groups accused of supporting the insurgents. This counterinsurgency strategy, which the government still employs, has resulted in an appalling loss of life, widespread destruction, massive displacement, and led to charges of genocide against former dictator and President Omar al-Bashir. In 2016, Amnesty International reported on the use of chemical weapons by government forces against civilians in the Jebel region of Darfur. Numerous villages have been razed to the ground, livelihoods destroyed, and women and girls have been subjected to pervasive rape and other forms of sexual violence. On the second half, we would examine the causes and triggers of these allegations of war crimes in Sudan's Darfur region. And join us to discuss this and help us have a better understanding is al-Bashir Idris. He's a public affairs analyst. He joins us from Nairobi's capital in Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us on One Slot.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, al-Bashir, if history serves us well, this issue of war crimes did not just start today. We've seen it over in the 2000s, for example, in 2003. So can you provide more context on the origins and the role of this rapid support forces, particularly their connection to the Janjaweed militia? How exactly has this history contributed to the current conflict we're witnessing in West Darfur?
Well, if we really want to get down into the history of the RSF and them stemming from the Janjaweed, RSF being Rapid Support Forces, then we can go as far back as the 1980s as then Prime Minister Saad al-Mahdi was supporting the Mujahideen within Darfur and back in the 80s. And from then it grew and then eventually became the Demons on Horseback. And that's what Janjaweed stands and means and stands for. So from the 2000s, we've seen heavy crimes against humanity that eventually led to the genocide indictment from the ICC in 2005. The Darfur War from 2002 onwards has been or rather 2003, has been a massive shift in the country's history in terms of how they respond in dealing with crimes and war crimes and crimes against humanity, as well as how the state is actually sanctioning this, as it was the Sudanese government and the Sudanese army that essentially supplied the Janjaweed with weapons to go against local African tribes in favor of giving the land towards more Arab tribes within the area. Unfortunately, this is what led to the genocide and ethnic cleansing. And it's very interesting on how we're now 20 years later here in 2023, and as you say, we're seeing history repeat itself. So the SAF and the Sudanese government are complicit for creating the Rapid Support Forces and even giving them the means of executing their ambitions of causing ethnic cleansing towards those who did not agree with the central government idea of Arabization. And this is how we've ended up here now, where history is repeating itself. It seems that the fighters back in the early 2000s, they may have grown old and they may have reached their 40s and 50s. However, now it seems to be their kids and the next generation after that. And so we're facing that we still haven't learned the lessons from what's going on there. And it seems this is why the ICC is getting involved, essentially, and the rest of the international community has had their eyes on Darfur, especially the recent, since the conflict broke out. We are now on day 95 since April 15th, where the war broke out in central Khartoum. So from that till now, in those 95 days, we have seen the most horrendous and atrocious crimes and atrocities you can think of, and that is if we can even see them. However, it's been the same tactics of burnt earth techniques and strategies that they used in the early 2000s, and they were using them now. And this is why it's led to such a humanitarian catastrophe. Really, I'm sure you may have seen on the news and seen information on a large influx of people essentially had to flee their homes and go into neighboring Chad on its eastern border. And that's created a humanitarian issue of epic proportions that if it's not looked into soon, then it will just keep on growing bigger and bigger.
Now, talking about this humanitarian issue, I mean, I would agree with you. We've seen the reports that's been used. There's even so-called talks of if you want to leave within the borders or going to Chad, you have to actually pay this rapid support forces. But the question is, what exactly is the Sudan military forces, the main military force, doing concerning this? Because there have also been allegations that, just like you rightly said, that they have left them to, deal with these issues by themselves. So why exactly is that happening?
Well, let's go towards what Mustafa Mohammed Ibrahim, who is an advisor to the Rapid Support Forces, he's one of the top brass. And on July the 12th of this year, he told the BBC that these clashes were part of an ongoing civil war between the local tribes and the Malamite tribes. And says that this is old and renewed. Mr. Ibrahim then further on goes to say that the RSF had no base in Mystery, which is along the border in Darfur, and accused of those that have raised this, that includes the Human Rights Watch, of relying on biased sources and having no presence on the ground. So in terms of the way that they're framing this and saying that it's an internal dispute and affair, it seems that the Rapid Support Forces is trying to clean its hands from what's going on there, even though there's a lot of video evidence and footages showing that the RSF are the perpetrators of these crimes. Now, with SAF, with the army, they were tasked as the border force within that region between Chad and Sudan of the border. However, in terms of presence and SAF presence there, well, it's technically nil. The alliance is created within the region of Darfur, especially in terms of military-wise, is that of based off tribal, it's based off ethnic, it's based off religious, so sectarian ones. And so to believe that the SAF kind of border forces that were supposed to be there would still remain there would not make sense, as it's very quick to turn coats when it comes to matters of conflict such as the ones we are seeing now.
Now, on one side, the RSF is saying that this is tribal conflict, just like you rightly said. The Sudan Armed Forces is nowhere to be found. It seems like it's struggling on its own battles there. Now, we are seeing an investigation commencing by the ICC. Meanwhile, in former investigations, the former president, Omar al-Bashir, is still at large, along with other accomplices. From your own assessment of this historical situation going on in Sudan, do you or are you confident in the investigations that the ICC is planning to commence towards this war crimes that have been committed in Sudan?
Well, this is a bit of a unique situation, as the indictment was really, and the charges were put on in 2005. And when we've seen or heard much of the ICC in terms of how they're recording and documenting and how they're, wishing to prosecute and go forward, for the past 17, 18 years, we really haven't heard much. But now to hear that the chief prosecutor has found a substantial amount of evidence that they should continue with that same warrant, and if anything, it's renewed war crimes. It's even though the ICC only has jurisdiction in Darfur, there's been a bunch of evidence that it's now even becoming more geolocated in the sense of in West Darfur, when the RSF, though they will allege that it wasn't them, when the governor of West Darfur was killed by the RSF, and it was caught on video in terms of his arrest and detainment, and later on that same day, he was executed by the RSF. And it was moments like that, and unfortunate and horrible moments of such nature, which then got to the attention and raised that profile up to the ICC. Well, they already knew what was going on, but now it's becoming very blatant and in front of everyone. So this is why the recent impact from the chief prosecutor is very important. Even just to add more, the governor of West Darfur, he is of Massive descent. So it's clear right there that not only were they going for, and they are going for, the civilians and those who from the pastoral backgrounds. They wanted as much as the governor itself. This is the first in a contemporary time frame in 17 to 20 years that they say they're going to open up a new investigation. The warrants are still out there and they want to check. However, let's be clear, the ICC has only mentioned crimes, but they have not mentioned the perpetrators. And that means that until further assessment from their side, until they believe who did these crimes against humanity and war crimes, they can't really say anything yet. Now, the jurisdiction of the ICC within Sudan is only in Darfur. Only in Darfur. There's nowhere else. They can't operate anywhere else. They do not have a mandate anywhere else in the country. It's only that in Darfur, and they found belief that these issues, that the investigation or warrants are still active.
Now, al-Bashir, sorry to cut you short there. I'm still trying to get a very clear picture. I mean, you talk about ethnic cleansing. So what ethnicities are mostly targeted? You mentioned Masalit, the West Darfur governor. So it's what ethnicity against the other? Let's get some clarity on what exactly these war crimes or this ethnic cleansing are about.
So in terms of ethnic cleansing, let's go through the definitions of crimes against humanity, which is basically anything that that is crimes against civilians in a very targeted and a large-scale manner. Now, let me just say ahead, I am not a lawyer and that of a legal background. However, in terms of the ethnic cleansing, so we got the Masalit, we got the Zengawi, we got those who are more of an African-based origin, according to the RSF, according to the Rapid Support Forces. It is amazing because we are all in Africa, and for some reason this thought of Arab superiority is the thing that's driving this cleansing in its sense. So if you were to see on sources online, on the news, of those refugees who've managed to escape Darfur and enter Chad, they would mention on their stories on how they're specifically targeting women, gender-based violence, separating men from women. There's basically executions happening in very gruesome manners, and these are testimonies said by the witnesses and the victims of these people. So that's what I mean by of the ethnic cleansing part. I can go in more deeper and say on how there's tribes within Chad and within Niger who believe they are of Arab descent, who are also moving their way into Darfur, being essentially invited in by the Rapid Support Forces and the Darfuri Arab tribes. And it's this belief that across the Sahel here, that this influx of tribalism, of Arab tribalism coming to occupy the space in West Darfur, and to occupy that space, they would need, in their belief, not be able to cooperate together, and this is what's leading to that ethnic cleansing.
That's a very serious situation going on in Sudan. We're seeing tribalism, just like you rightly talked about, ethnic cleansing. Meanwhile, there's still political war between the RSF and the Sudan armed forces. And we've seen peace talks in Egypt. We've seen several peace talks going on, but somehow we've not been able to get a successful ceasefire. So first of all, what exactly is the situation right now, humanitarian situation in Sudan, and how do you think peace can be brought in Sudan?
That's really the $1 million question, or rather $1 billion question at this point, in terms of bringing peace to Sudan. Now, as the previous speaker before me has said, this is an existential crisis for both the RSF and the SAF. And both sides believe that they cannot essentially back down and come to the table and negotiate with each other. We've seen it in Jeddah, we've seen it in Egypt, we've seen it with IGAD. So there's been multiple attempts of having peace processes, and yet they keep on ending the same, regardless of whoever sends their delegation. And the reason why that is, we're dealing with people that this is do or die within their eyes. This is it, essentially. The reason why it can't go further on, according to some of them, is that the RSF is trying to dismantle the 1956 Sudanese state after gaining independence in 1956. Now, if they're trying to dismantle this state whilst trying to redraw borderlines within the country and within the continent in itself, that's a concern for the regional people, and that should be a concern also for the African Union, as within its constitution, essentially, and its points of state sovereignty, and believing to still remain with borders inherited during colonial times. The RSF is essentially trying to rewrite those lines, but in a very aggressive way that seeks to destabilize not just Sudan, but the entire region itself.
I would agree with you that it's definitely a dire situation in Sudan, looking at the war crimes going on and the current political conflict. We'll definitely continue these conversations until we get to the root of the matter and solve this issue. Thank you once again, al-Bashir Idris, for sharing so much insight and thoughts into this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a wonderful conversation, but the situation in Sudan remains deeply concerning as civilians continue to endure extreme violence, displacement, and grave human rights violations. International efforts to address the crisis and protect the affected populations are crucial in ensuring accountability, delivering humanitarian aid, and promoting lasting peace and stability in Sudan. It is only hoped that this current investigation will be fair and thorough to ensure justice, reconciliation, and the protection of human rights. Thank you so much for joining us in today's edition of Onslaught. I'm Rita Modia. Till next time.